Hello and welcome to the channel. This is Recruit Painting, and in this episode of What I'm Painting, I am painting the Splittertarnmuster camo pattern of the Fallschirmjäger in Italy and the Mediterranean. This model is from Crusade Miniatures, and it was a really fun metal mini to paint, and it's going to be a platoon commander for some of my armies for bolt action, my army themed around Italy. So let's get started. To begin with, on a prime of ghoul grey, I then painted the trousers and the helmet in a coat of Xandri dust. I like this colour because it reflects that kind of Dunkelgelb sort of colour when I'm painting German armour, but also it's a really good colour for the fatigues that they're wearing underneath the camo pattern, but also the sort of Dunkelgelb helmet colour as well. And I'm going to make these two look a little bit different later by using contrast paints and shades to give them both slightly different tones of colour, so they look like different materials. As the Xandri just dried, I then went in with green grey from Vallejo on the camo schmock as the base colour. So getting in all those areas, trying to avoid the webbing, but also not really too bothered if I touch the webbing, because then it just means that there's no ghoul grey left showing through if I kind of miss any areas later on. So gave that two thin coats across all of the camo. As the green grey dries, I then picked up some skeleton hordes, mixed it with a 50-50 mix of lamy and medium, and then put a coat of this on top of the helmet. So I'm using this to differentiate the colour of the helmet to that of the fatigues underneath the camo uniform. So this is just one of the ways that I'm just going to differentiate so it looks visibly different to the viewer. Then for the fatigues underneath the camo, I use brown tone from the historical range. I really like this shade, so I mixed it with lamy and medium and put that on the trousers. And again, it just differentiates the colour, the base colour, from that of the helmet. Okay, so here is the first colour going down for the camo pattern, and that's flat brown from Vallejo. And this is probably like a 50-50 sort of mix of the green and the brown. So you want 50% of the brown showing through and 50% of the base colour of green showing through. And the pattern itself is quite geometric in its shape, so there's lots of straight lines, pointed edges, longer areas, chunkier areas, but I do recommend having some reference photos to refer to because they're really useful. And what I've done is I've tried to copy some of the patterns that I saw, but also add some of my own in the sort of style to kind of fill in those areas, so it looked like I had that 50-50 coverage of the brown against the green. So here's a little spin around for you of sort of what I've done in terms of those patterns there. Again, I copied some images, but also kind of added my own that kind of looks similar. There you go. So then it was time for the lighter green tone that's in the camo pattern, and I used flat green from Vallejo. This colour on the actual camo pattern itself, there aren't many sort of areas of it. I want to say probably maybe 20% of the camo pattern is this colour itself, and they're just sort of little sort of, again, sharped straight line shapes kind of intertwined, mostly within the brown areas, and there are some that are solely within the green areas. So again, I just tried to kind of copy that sort of pattern and that feel from reference photos that I saw. So again, just sort of filling in an area here and then trying to space them out as best I can. And then there's another little spin for you so you can see what that green looks like against the brown on that base colour of flat green. This step is the rain pattern using bronze green. Now, in the reference photos that I've seen, the rain pattern covers about 60%, maybe 70% of the actual camo pattern itself. with some areas left blank with the original colours showing through. But what it is it's just lots of little lines in rows, and then in columns, and in sort of like patchy areas, and then sort of covering other larger areas as well. But for this, just so that it's referencing the original camo, I've done 2 rows of 4 columns in certain patches, but I've probably covered about 50%, maybe 60% of the model. But you can absolutely skip this step, and I have on one of my test models, and it's actually one of the ones that I'll show you at the end of the video. You know, and at a gaming table distance you wouldn't even notice, so it's entirely up to you whether you want to do this step. And that's the rain pattern down, as you can see, just where I've put it. Some areas are left blank, some areas have that rain pattern, but again, you can completely miss this step if you want. For this step, I'm back to the Zandri dust, with it watered down, about 4 parts water to 1 part of the Zandri dust, just to highlight the top of the helmet and blend in the shade of the skeleton horde with the original Zandri dust colour. So that'll go on the top of the helmet and then around the rim of the helmet as well. And then the same colour again back on the trousers, just highlighting those raised areas with a couple of passes. So 1 pass in the highlighted areas and sort of down towards the darker areas, and then let that dry and then go back again with that same thinned paint back onto the highlighted area, so it just blends quite nicely. Looking at the reference photos of the Fallschirmjäger in Italy, a lot of their webbing was brown, so brown leathers. So I've used boot brown from the historical range by the Army Pater here, and I'm going to use that for the holster, for the webbing, and for his boots as well. So all the sort of leather areas, I've gone for a brown leather look. And when it's back in focus, you'll see that all of the leather areas are going to get 2 thin coats of that boot brown paint. So for this project, I really want this guy to look like a veteran of the Italian campaign, particularly of the Gustav line and Monte Cassino. So to do that with his helmet, I'm just adding a bit of chipping to it, using German grey from Vallejo. I've chose to stipple it on, but if you want, you can sponge it on as well. Both results were very similar, so it's personally just down to your preference. So just got most of the paint off of the brush and just, you know, gently stippled it on to just give that sort of worn out and used look about the helmet. So for the flesh, I'm gonna go for base colour, shade, layer and highlight. So the first colour that's gone down is 2 thin coats of Cadian flesh tone. So you can see he's got his sleeves rolled up, so I need to do his arms as well. But yeah, just going around all those flesh areas with 2 thin layers of Cadian flesh tone. And just to prove it happened, I completely forgot about his water bottle, which was in the Zandri dust colour. So yeah, just went over that and gave it 2 thin coats. And as I came back to this, I realised that I left a bit of flash on. So later I did actually trim that off and tidy it back up, but you're just seeing the painting step here. And whilst the Zandri dust was out, again, I figured I'd go for blonde hair for this guy, and there's a very, very small amount of hair on this model. So I've just kind of added a thin layer of that Zandri dust just below the helmet there, and that'll get a different shade to the 2 shades that I've already used on the Zandri dust. So the first shade that's going down on the flesh, in fact the only shade that's going down on the flesh, is Reichland Flesh Shade by Citadel. Not that you can tell from the label, because the label's gone. So yeah, just putting that on all the flesh areas and leaving it to dry. Then whilst the Reichland Flesh Shade is drying, I then went in with some brown tone on the leather areas, including the boots. And then whilst the brown tone is drying, I then use black from Vallejo to colour in the binoculars that he's holding and the chin strap of his helmet. So it does go back and there it is. So yeah, just those black areas. And it was at this point I thought I probably should have shaded the camo before I started adding all these details, but you live and learn. So I am being really careful here not to touch any of the areas that I've already painted and shaded, because it's not just a one step, it's a couple steps I'd need to go back on. So just being really careful here, but obviously you can do this the other way around, not like me. And then it was time for quite a stressful shading experience, trying to shade all of the camo without getting that shade on any other area that I've already highlighted and shaded. So I think I used a character brush here with the military shade from the historical range by the Army Painter, with a mix of a 50-50 mix of Lamy and medium again. Again in all of those sort of camo areas. So yeah, really careful here, but obviously you won't need to do that because you'll do it the other way around. Now I completely forgot to miss a step here. So before this step I used Vallejo black to black out the eyes, and then I prefer the technique of two small dots in the corner of each eye when I'm painting eyes. So the left eye I absolutely nailed. I was really proud of it. Was feeling really confident, and then I went on to the right eye of the model and completely ruined it. So I do go back into that eye a little bit later on, but it's just practice. The more you do it, the better you get. Keeping your arms steady, keeping your hands steady, and making that triangle posture with your elbows on the table just really helps to kind of stabilize everything. But yeah, this is the one I completely ruined, and you can't see it because my thumb's in the way. So this is what it's looking like after that first pass on the eye, and then I go in for another go. Now for this step you can of course skip it. I've decided to paint the eyes on these models in particular because I quite like them. They make great sort of platoon commanders for my bolt action army, for a themed army that I'm building. So I thought for the platoon commanders I'd paint the eyes in for them, but for the rest of the army I probably won't, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, you can completely skip this step, but you know, practice makes progress, so it is worth, you know, to keep going and doing it when you can. With the eyes painted, it was then time to finish the flesh areas. So I've done the base colour of Cadian flesh tone, we've shaded it with Reikland flesh shade, and now it's time to layer back some of that Cadian flesh tone on the sort of raised areas around the cheekbones, the visible areas that you can see, so the nose as well. Of course the brow is hidden by the helmet, around the chin I chose as well, and sort of upper lip area. As the layer of Cadian flesh tone was drying, I then thinned boot brown to about a 3:1 ratio of water to paint, just to add some sort of worner areas of the leather, so just to give it that kind of worn look. So around the toe caps, the edges of the leather areas, around the holster, and some areas of the webbing as well, just to make it look a bit worn. So as that layer of boot brown was drying, I used Kislev flesh just to highlight the raised areas of the flesh. It's the final highlight on the skin tones here. So that was on the knuckles, end of the fingers, end of the nose, those sort of prominent raised areas on the Mini. As the Kislev flesh was drying with Seraphim sepia, that thin layer of hair that's visible at the back of the helmet, I just shaded that area with the Seraphim sepia, so it's got a different shade to the helmet and to the trousers. And later when that's dry, I missed filming this step, I just highlighted it with some very small highlights of Ubshanti bone from Citadel. Back to leather areas now, and I'm going to use Scrag Brown on top of that brown or boot brown layer that we went back over the shade earlier, just on those worn out areas, so the tip of the boots, around the holster, so all of those areas that will get a bit of wear and tear as leather. That Scrag Brown works really well to kind of show that. So the next colour I'm using here is steel, and that's for the very small area of belt buckle that's visible just behind the binoculars and the face of his watch, which is on his left arm that's holding the binoculars. So just a very small amount of steel in those areas. Once the steel had dried, I then used brown tone to shade the black on the binoculars, on the watch strap, and the steel areas as well. Then for the binoculars, they've obviously already had the black by Vallejo, they've had the shade of brown tone, and now I'm just going to add some highlights of Dawnstone just around the edges to them to add a bit of texture to the material itself, so just on the sort of highlighted areas. And with that final highlight of Dawnstone, that is the model finished. And this is what they look like after basing. So I've got two models here. The first one is the test model that I painted. With that one, I actually missed out the rain pattern on the camo itself, and I think you'll see that the difference is really subtle. So it is really down to your personal preference and whether you want to do that or not. And I'm still deciding whether I want to go back and kind of add it. But at the minute, I'm quite happy to do that comparison for you guys. So if you found this tutorial useful at all, please do consider liking and subscribing to the channel. I hope to get a few more tutorials out to you guys pretty soon, with a variety of different settings. So obviously we've done sci-fi so far, we've done World War I, at the minute we've got World War II, so yeah, who knows what's next. But yeah, if you're interested, do please consider subscribing to the channel and just leaving a comment on what you think. So I'll leave this one spinning around for you just so you can have a closer look, and hopefully see you guys again soon.